Taxonomy is the branch of biology that classifies and names organisms. Classification involves assigning organisms to groups whose members are more closely related to one another than to members of other groups. These groups are progressively more inclusive, with the broadest category being the kingdom. On the screen shows the taxonomic classification of 4 different animals. All of these animals are in the kingdom Animalia. As you go down the list, they start to become parts of different groups, which we will learn about later. Each taxonomic category can contain a number of smaller categories. For example, a kingdom contains many phyla or divisions. A phylum or division contains a number of classes, and so on. The smallest category, the species, is defined as a group of organisms capable of interbreeding. The full name of a species is written in the form genus and then species. The full name is sometimes abbreviated by using the first letter of the genus name, followed by a period, and the species name shown on the right. The system of classification used today was first developed by a Swedish botanist named Carolus Linnaeus. Linnaean taxonomy classifies organisms based on their physical and structural similarities. Organisms are placed into different levels in a hierarchy. A group of organisms in a classification system is called a taxon. The basic taxon in the Linnaean system is the species. In this system, species are most commonly defined as a group of organisms that can breed and produce offspring that can reproduce. Linnaeus' system gives each species a scientific name. Binomial nomenclature is a system that gives each species a 2-part scientific name using Latin words. The first part of the name is the genus. A genus includes one or more physically similar species that are thought to be closely related. The second part of the name is the species descriptor. It can refer to a trait of the species, or for the scientist who first described it, or its native location. The kingdom model. Since 1969, most biologists have recognized 5 kingdoms. All living organisms can be divided into 5 groups or kingdoms. So, according to this picture here, all living organisms in the 1960s were thought to belong to either the plants, the animals, the fungus, the protists, or the monera. The monera are organisms such as bacteria, small and microscopic. The protists, also small microscopic organisms. The 5 kingdoms are characterized by unique combinations of cellular and life history features. So all organisms were divided into 5 kingdoms based on the type of cell that they have, whether they were prokaryotic or eukaryotic, their complexity, were they unicellular or multicellular, type of nutrition, autotrophs, meaning that they can make their own food, or heterotrophs, meaning that they have to go and ingest their own food. Motility, how did they move? Life cycle, did they reproduce asexually, or sexually? And also other features such as the nervous system. So using those characteristics, we were able to divide all living things into 5 kingdoms. In the early 19th century, scientists only recognized 2 kingdoms, plants or animals, and this was because we didn't have the technology to see smaller organisms. In 1866, scientists now recognized that plants and animals were also different. There were also fungus. In 1959, scientists recognized a 4th kingdom, the protists. These were single-celled and multicellular microscopic organisms. In 1969, with the better development of microscopes, we were able to see that there was another kingdom, the monera, which were microscopic bacteria. And in the 1990s, recognized that there are 6 kingdoms. We're able to study the kingdom monera more closely and discover that there were differences within that kingdom. This is where we've come up with our 6th kingdom called Archaea. The archaea consists of microorganisms that are very different from both bacteria and the rest of the kingdoms. When scientists split the kingdom Monera into two, they found out that the two groups of prokaryotes that were studied had very different cell wall chemistry. In terms of genes, these two groups are more different from each other than animals are from plants, fungus, and protists. Based on these differences, scientists propose that all life be divided into three domains. These domains are above the kingdom level. This system more clearly shows the great diversity of prokaryotes in the tree of life by dividing them into two domains. These domains are called bacteria and archaea. All eukaryotes are placed into the third domain called eukarya. The domain bacteria includes single-celled prokaryotes in the kingdom bacteria. The domain bacteria is one of the largest groups of organisms on Earth. In fact, there are more bacteria in your mouth than there are people that have ever lived. Bacteria can be classified by many traits, such as their shape, need for oxygen, and whether they cause disease. Like bacteria, organisms in the domain archaea are single-celled prokaryotes. However, the cell walls of archaea and bacteria are chemically different. Archaea are known for their ability to live in extreme environments, such as deep sea vents, hot geysers, Antarctic waters, and salt lakes. All archaea are classified in the kingdom archaea. The domain eukarya is made up of all organisms with eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells have a distinct nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. Eukarya may be single-celled, such as most protists. They can also be colonial, such as some algae, or multicellular, like you. The domain eukarya includes the kingdoms Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. Cladistics is classification based on common ancestry. Similar traits between species are often the result of sharing a common ancestor, such as the ancestor shared by dogs and wolves. However, scientists now know that similar traits such as wings of bats and birds can also evolve in species that are adapted to similar environmental conditions. To classify species according to how they are related, scientists must look at more than just physical traits. Modern classification is based on figuring out evolutionary relationships using evidence from living species, the fossil record, and molecular data. The evolutionary history for a group of species is called phylogeny. Phylogenies can be shown as branching tree diagrams. In a way, these diagrams are like family trees. The branches of a family tree show how family members are related to each other. The branches of an evolutionary tree show how different groups of species are related to one another. The most common method used to make evolutionary trees is called cladistics. Cladistics is the classification based on common ancestry. The goal of cladistics is to place species in the order in which they descended from a common ancestor. A cladogram, as shown on the screen, is an evolutionary tree that proposes how species may be related to each other through common ancestors. The root of the word cladistics and cladogram is the word clade. A clade is a group of species that share a common ancestor. Through the course of evolution, certain traits change in some species of a clade but stay the same in other species. Therefore, each species in a clade has some traits that have not changed from its ancestors, such as the similar shells of the glyptodons and the modern armadillo. However, each species also has traits that have changed over evolutionary time. The traits that can be used to figure out evolutionary relationships among a group of species are those that are shared by some species but are not present in others. These traits are called derived characters. We will look at each of these topics in more detail during class time. So I leave you today with this science trivia. Did you know the total number of species on Earth is estimated to be between 10 and 1 million, with less than 2 million having been described, named, and classified by scientists? It's estimated that 99% of all plant and animal species that have ever lived are already extinct. And finally, Of the known animal species, 99% are smaller than bumblebees.